everyone, a very warm welcome to this enlightening webinar. Today we are going to present a session on the rising burden of pharmacovigilance requirements in early drug development. My name is Charu Jha and I am the Senior Drug Safety Associate from the Department of MMS. My co-presenters are Katrina O'Connor, who is a Senior Medical Writer, and Esme Venter, who is the Principal Medical Reviewer. I will be presenting on the reporting compliance and setting up safety database. In the USA, the health authority is the Food and Drug Administration, commonly known as the US FDA. As per the FDA's guidance, all reportable individual case safety reports need to be submitted on the MedWatch, which is the FDA Form 3500A. This is available in their website. FDA will also accept foreign suspected adverse reaction reports on a CIOMS-1 form instead of FDA Form 3500A. These forms should be completed with all available information, including a brief narrative describing the suspected adverse reaction and any other relevant information. If applicable, the narrative must also include identification of similar reports and an analysis of the significance of the suspected adverse reaction. Before submission, each individual case report should generally be unblinded. If a sponsor has concerns that unblinding will compromise the integrity of the study, the sponsor should discuss this in advance with the review division. FDA accepts electronic submission of 15-day IND safety reports in Electronic Common Technical Document, which is abbreviated as ECTDD format. Complete information on ECTD specifications and guidance can be found on the FDA website. FDA recommends that sponsors submit 7-day IND safety reports electronically in ECTD format. If the IND is not in this format, other means of rapid communication, for example, telephone, facsimile transmission, or email may be used. The local governing body in US is the Institutional Review Board, abbreviated as IRB. Investigators are required to promptly report to the IRB all unanticipated problems, abbreviated as UAPs, involving risk to human subjects or others, including adverse events that should be considered unanticipated problems. The term unanticipated problem used in the A reporting to IRB's guidance describes adverse events and other types of problems that investigators are required to report to IRBs. Lastly, there is a special note to consider that the sponsor is responsible for determining whether there is a reasonable possibility that the drug caused the adverse event, taking into consideration the investigator's assessment. For serious events that are unexpected, the sponsor considers the investigator's causality assessment but submits an IND safety report only for those events for which the sponsor determines there is a reasonable possibility that the drug caused the event, regardless of the investigator's causality assessment. In the European Union, the health authority is the European Medicines Agency, abbreviated as EMA. For clinical trials authorized under the Clinical Trials Directive, sponsors must report the information for assessment by the relevant EU and European Economic Area authorities. Guidance is available from the EMA to help clinical trial sponsors comply with their reporting obligations. Suspected unexpected serious adverse events, commonly known as SUSARs, should be reported to Vigilance in the form of E2B-R3 extensive markup language, which is the XML file, instead of separately to national competent authorities in each EU or EEA country where related clinical trials are running. This rule came into effect on 31st January 2022. Sponsors should create an active EMA account in EMA Account Management, register the organization in EMA's Organization Management Service if it has not already been registered, designate a person responsible for vigilance, choose one of the following reporting modes. First is the EV web, where sponsors use vigilance for creating and sending SUSARs. Second is the gateway, where sponsors send SUSAR from their own database to vigilance. Sponsors should also create a clinical trial application in CTIS or in the European Union Drug Regulatory Authority's clinical trials, which is the UDRACITY. The local governing body in EU is the Ethics Committee, which is an independent body in a member state of the European Union consisting of healthcare professionals and non-medical members. Their responsibility is to protect the rights, safety, and well-being of human subjects involved in a clinical trial. With the Clinical Trials Directive, the European Union envisioned a harmonization of research ethics committees across Europe. The reporting requirements are either 7-day or 15-day SUSARs depending on investigators' causality. Here, sponsors' assessment is not the reporting factor. However, the narrative must reflect both investigators' and sponsors' assessment. In the United Kingdom, the health authority is the Medicine and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, which is known as MHRA. A clinical trial sponsor must report all UK relevant SUSAR that occur during a clinical trial to the MHRA. Sponsors may use the current eSUSAR portal to submit single SUSAR report. Sponsors may register to either the ICSR submission portal, which replaces the EV web, or the MHRA gateway, which replaces the EV gateway to submit SUSAR reports in bulk. All studies which will involve people as participants need a research ethics committee review. The principal investigator or lead researcher on the study is responsible for seeking this review. RECs are there to protect the rights, safety, dignity, and well-being of research participants. So they will consider things such as fairness of the study population, burden to participants, and duty of confidence. The reporting requirements are similar to that of EU. Here also, sponsors' assessment is not the reporting factor. However, the narrative must reflect both investigators' and sponsors' assessment clearly. The safety activities throughout a study cycle mainly comprise of the below three stages. First is the initial stage where the safety activities are documented in a safety management plan with the help of draft or finalized investigators brochure, study protocol, kick-off meeting minutes, and finalized statement of work. The SMP should clearly mention all safety-related activities and responsibility and must be finalized after multiple review from all the parties involved in the study. Along with the SMP in progress, the safety database also needs to be set up and should be ready to process ICSRs before the first subject first visit. The mid stage comprise of all the case processing activities, submissions of reportable event such as 7-day, 15-day SUSARs to the stakeholders as mentioned in the SMP, and reconciliation of all database events with the clinical database. The start point or the frequency of the reconciliation depends on what has been agreed in the SMP. It could be monthly or quarterly or end of study. The final stage involves the activities after the study is closed. Once the clinical database is locked, the database transfer needs to be performed by transferring all the required documents from safety database to the sponsor in the agreed manner documented in the SMP. Post that, periodic and aggregate reports such as Development Safety Update Report, which is the DSUR, Clinical Study Report, which is the CSR, and IND Annual Safety Reports can be initiated. Now, let's take a look to understand what exactly is a safety database, how it is different from clinical database, and what are required for its setup. Safety database is a software which is the central repository for individual case safety reports or ICSRs collected for a company's medicinal product from all sources globally. It is compliant with the latest regulatory requirements such as ISO, ICSR, ICH, E2B submission. Clinical database collects vast data and all kinds of AEs, assays from screening till end of study, including all laboratory tests, subjects' vitals performed on each visit to the site. On the other hand, safety database collect only reportable events as defined in study-specific protocol with relevant information with respect to the reported event. To set up or configure a new study in safety database, the minimum required documents are finalized IP, protocol, site contact list to configure investigators' details, regulatory approval numbers such as IND, Health Canada, Udracity, etc. to generate corresponding SIOMs, MedWatch, XMLs for submission, and sponsors' contact details which will reflect in these regulatory reports. Till now, it is clear that the safety database is a central repository for ICSRs. However, this is to note that the safety database is also beneficial for numerous other safety activities such as signal detection, detailed analytics, electronic case intake, and expedited reporting in both E2B R2 and R3 formats, risk management, periodic reporting, and submission. A structured safety database provides tool for the analysis, visualization, and reporting of safety data. This gives the company key information for safety signal management and means for the ongoing evaluation of the benefit risk profile of the product. Automatic detection of missing data and duplicate reports checking are standard feature of the safety database to ensure quality of ICSRs. Pre-existing report formats such as SIOMs and MedWatch in the safety database and automated functions for the submission of ICSRs to the competent authorities assist with ensuring submission is completed within required timelines. No additional manual work is needed as electronic gateway submission can be used instead of manual entry, example through EMA's web portal. Thank you. I hope this webinar had been a great learning experience for you. I now hand it over to my colleague, Katrina. Over to you, Katrina.
Thank you, Charu. Hello, everyone. I'm Katrina O'Connor. I'm a safety medical writer with MMS, and I'm going to discuss reports and other documentation for safety compliance. Sponsors are required to periodically submit aggregate safety reports with health authorities. The periodicity depends on the report and the health authority. I'm going to provide an overview of the aggregate safety reports. Aggregate reporting in pharmacovigilance refers to the process of analysing and reporting cumulative safety data for a drug or investigational medicinal product in a standardised format. They include the cumulative summary of safety information for products under development and usually include information from non-clinical studies and safety data on subjects participating in ongoing and completed clinical trials. It's important that planning activities for any aggregate report begin well in advance of the data lock point to ensure that all stakeholders have adequate time to prepare outputs, perform data analysis, and draft discussions and conclusions. The Development Safety Update Report, or DSUR, is the preferred format to provide a uniform standard report to all regulatory agencies worldwide on an annual basis. To conform to individual region and country-specific requirements, standardised appendices are submitted with the main body of the DSUR. To facilitate the analysis within a DSUR, it is helpful to have continuous signal detection throughout the interval, monthly literature reviews and regular update of literature search strategy based on the most recent information, identification of key individual case safety reports for discussion if applicable. The DSUR is a cross-functional document requiring input from multiple functional areas, including safety, clinical, regulatory, non-clinical and biostatistics. In addition to the DSUR, other periodic aggregate reports include the IND Annual Safety Report, specific for the US FDA, and periodic suspected unexpected adverse reaction or SUSAR line listings, which are submitted per country-specific requirements, and I'll provide a little more information later on. Presented here is a non-exhaustive list of those countries and regions which require standard DSUR regional appendices and include the US FDA, Canada's Health Canada, the UK MHRA, EU EMA, the Chinese NMPA and the Japanese PMDA. Other countries may have specific reporting requirements, and it is recommended that the individual regulatory agency guidance is consulted when preparing a DSUR to ensure compliance. In addition to the DSUR, there are other aggregate safety reports. Under 21 CFR 312.33, the FDA requires sponsors with an IND in effect to submit an IND annual report. In 2011, the FDA adopted the ICH's guidance, the E2F DSUR, and began accepting DSUR in replace of the IND annual report. Currently, the FDA is proposing switching all US IND annual reports to the use of a DSUR instead. Periodic SUSAR line listings are to be provided by the sponsor to investigators and should be aggregated in line listings in periods warranted by the nature of the research project or clinical development project and by the volume of SUSARs generated. Generally, these are submitted on a semi-annual basis. However, some countries may require a more frequent submission. To facilitate the analysis of data for the aggregate safety reports, a reference safety information or RSI should be maintained. The main purpose of the RSI is to serve as the basis for expectedness assessments of suspected adverse reactions or suspected SARs by the sponsor for expedited reporting of SUSARs and annual safety reporting. The RSI should be located within the investigator brochure in a clearly identified separate section. This section should include a list of expected adverse reactions, for example, in the form of a table where all adverse reactions are listed by the nature and severity, including frequency. Early in the clinical development of an investigational medicinal product, when subject exposure is low, there may be no suspected SARs reported for the IMP. However, a clearly defined section of the IB called the RSI should still be present, followed by a statement that no SARs are considered expected by the sponsor. It is now recommended to update the RSI, if necessary, only once per year in alignment with the annual report for a DSUR. I'll now hand over to Esme, who will discuss the safety surveillance and signal detection within clinical trials. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. I will be talking about safety surveillance and signal detection in clinical trials. I will provide a process overview and discuss some items for consideration. The overall aim of collecting safety data in interventional clinical trials is to establish the safety profile of a drug and thus to determine the benefit-risk profile before marketing, while protecting patients during the development process and communicating relevant and important information about the suspected adverse effects to investigators and regulatory authorities. Therefore, the main goal of safety surveillance are firstly to identify any serious or important emerging safety concerns as quickly as possible in order to minimize harm to participating subjects, and secondly, to identify issues in the conduct of the study that can potentially be corrected, thus permitting successful completion of a study that might otherwise not meet its objectives. Safety surveillance will be performed by evaluating aggregate safety data for an IMP, firstly on study level, including the safety and clinical database, and secondly on program level, across all studies for the same IMP, including closed studies. Data assessed on program level will include literature review, non-clinical, animal or in vitro and/or epidemiological studies, information presented at professional or scientific meetings, reports from foreign or local regulatory agencies, and reports from commercial marketing experience if applicable. Generally, this analysis will become more informative as drug development progresses and data accumulate. That is why it is important to perform aggregate review of all safety data from open and closed trials. As a result of safety review, the following decisions can then be made. Review or update of the benefit-risk profile of the product and define risk minimization activities for implementation. Updates to the investigator brochure, protocol or informed consent form, update or development of the development safety update report, development or updates of the risk management plan, and to communicate emergent safety issues and document updates to investigators and regulatory authorities. The key role of the safety physician in safety surveillance starts with the setup of the process. This includes drafting of the safety surveillance plan, defining the signal detection strategy, and defining the tools that are going to be used during the process. Secondly, defining the outputs required to be processed, to be programmed for safety surveillance. And then to coordinate a multidisciplinary group with members of the medical team, pharmacovigilance team, data managers, biostatisticians, programmers, regulatory operations, and members of the unblinded pharmacovigilance and medical team. The diagram on the right on this slide provides an overview of the roles and responsibilities of the safety physician during safety surveillance. The FDA draft guidance for industry includes a number of revised recommendations, amongst them the scope and methodology of aggregate analyses, and also the plan for safety surveillance, including what elements should be included in the plan. As demonstrated on this slide, you can see that safety surveillance activities span across the whole life cycle of a clinical trial, starting in parallel with the safety operations startup at study level and ending with the closure of the trial. It does not involve a single clinical trial only, but span across the complete clinical program for an IMP when applicable. So which methods do we use for signal detection? If we look at statistical methods, it can include increased frequency of review, disproportionality reporting analyses, which assess the association between drugs and adverse events. They compare observed reports of both the drug and the event with expected reports based on underlying rates. These analyses provide valuable insights into emerging drug safety concerns, especially for drug reactions not fully captured in clinical trials. Methods aimed at specific groups of adverse events. Here we review unexpected events, serious adverse events, and most importantly, deaths, severe adverse events leading to discontinuation, and adverse events of special interest. With methods aimed at specific patient populations, we look at geographic, pediatric, and geriatric populations and also gender differences. Methods aimed at specific circumstances of medical use. Here, cases of overdose, abuse, misuse, medication error, and occupational exposure are reviewed. We have a number of safety net tools to our disposal. Firstly, designated medical events are serious and rare medical events that are often causally associated with drugs across multiple pharmacological or therapeutic classes. Even small numbers of reports of such an event can trigger a signal and require special attention. The European Medical Agency maintains a list of MEDOR preferred terms that identify DMEs. The important medical event list serves as a reference for classifying suspected adverse reactions related to medications. When assessing drug safety, healthcare professionals and regulatory agencies use this list to identify serious events. By categorizing adverse events, they can then monitor drug safety trends and make informed decisions about drug approvals, labeling, and risk management. Links for both these lists are available on the internet for reference. We also have adverse events of special interest, which are defined in the respective study protocols. So how do we evaluate and communicate safety signals? Firstly, the safety physician reviews and analyzes safety data for signal detection and evaluation. He or she then compares review data to the currently available reference safety information in the investigator brochure, the most recently updated drug safety update report, and also to the results from previous review. The safety physician conducts safety meetings with the client and/or the data monitoring committee to discuss emerging safety issues and seek consensus on actions regarding safety signals. The frequency and duration of these meetings will depend on the rate of recruitment in a particular trial and may vary during the conduct of the trial. A centralized repository of information and actions related to safety issues for logging and tracking of identified safety signals is maintained. And software tools are also available, which supports identification, investigation, and tracking of safety signals in client-sponsored clinical trials. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar. If you have any additional questions or require further information, please don't hesitate to reach out and email all your questions to info@mmsholdings.com, and we will respond to them at our earliest convenience.